Okay, is there any questions about anything before we start? No? So I understand there'll be an STM strike next month, but nobody really knows exactly what that is. So just keep in touch with me. Like if it's going to affect all the students or no one can make it to class, then we'll do Zoom or we'll find some alternative to it. So I don't know any details about what the exact parameters are. Like if they're going to run it sometimes, or there's going to be like no bus services or whatever. But we'll get through it together. Okay. So for this class, we're going to switch gears again. We're going to talk about policies, and we're going to spend 3 lectures on policies. Today we'll talk about like sort of an introduction to policies. We'll look at a fun examples, which is airport security. And then in the next 2 classes, we'll look at more technical policies. Both of them relate to browsers. One of them is how a browser handles cookies, and one is how it handles JavaScript and active content. Okay, policies, procedures, and processes are critical to security, but they're not really, they don't get as much attention as concrete things like protocols or like crypto protocols or software security or things like that. If we go back to Stride, a lot of what we'll see under policies has to do with the E in Stride. So again, to reemphasize, in a lot of security contexts, you learn a lot about the T, tampering. You might learn a lot about I, information disclosure. Denial of service is kind of more of a networking thing, but in network security, you'll definitely learn about D. Doesn't really show up in other contexts. And then things like S, R, and E are kind of less covered. Okay, so in this course, when we talk about social engineering, that will be S. So we'll spend a lot of time on S. In these 3 lectures, we'll spend a lot of time on E, which is escalation of privilege. We've already seen some examples of escalation of privilege, although I did rearrange the lectures, so some of these you actually have not seen. So the first one you haven't seen yet, you'll see it later. But the second one, we talked about how does a website figure out what your public key is, a certificate authority, if they want to issue you a certificate. And there was the whole thing of like, it will send an email to admin@yourdomain.ca or whatever. So that's an example of a policy. We saw a problem, which is that not every CA used the same list of email addresses. So there was one CA that decided to use SSL certificates. That's a policy. They decided that they'll accept SSL certificates at domain.ca as a certificate. And because that policy was not understood by other people, because it was out of line with what all the other CAs were doing, it created a problem, and someone was able to get a fake Microsoft certificate because of that policy decision, okay? So it wasn't really a technical decision, it was a policy decision that led to that particular attack. Policies can be sort of subcomponent of other attacks, so it's not necessarily the end of the whole attack, but it can be something that gets something in position, like some malware in position or something like that, and then the malware does another kind of an attack. So we'll see some examples of that. Policies are interesting from a methodology perspective because we have pretty good methodologies for looking at a piece of software and trying to figure out whether it has security vulnerabilities or not. We like literally have nothing for policies almost. Okay, so you can't, it's hard to even like articulate what a policy is or write it down. But we'll circle back to this at the end of the lectures when we think about like what can we do about this problem. But it's interesting from a methodological standpoint because there isn't clear methodologies. Okay, so I mentioned this already. We'll do a sort of fun example of the airport security today. I'll give you some other quick examples before we do that. Next class, we'll talk about a browser policy called the same origin policy. It governs, actually, I think we do it in reverse order. We'll first talk about the cookie. I can't remember the order that we do it in. But same origin policy has to do with active content. If you have JavaScript, what does JavaScript running on a website do? if the JavaScript's coming from a third party, can the third party see everything that's happening on that website? Can you isolate JavaScript? That kind of stuff. Things like cross-site scripting are attacks that fall under, they're a direct response to the policy decision of the same origin policy. And then we'll look at cookie policies. And so another branch of attack is called cross-site request forgery. So that's an example of something that fell out of the way that browsers treat cookies. Okay, so some quick examples just so we sort of think about like what is a policy and like what are we actually talking about here. So we maybe briefly touched on password policies. So a password policy would be like you're trying to register for a website. The website says you have to have a capital letter, you have to have a special character, it has to be 12 characters long. That's a policy. The website doesn't have to do that. They don't have to have a policy. They decide to do it. It's a decision. It makes an impact on users. Maybe it's a good impact. Maybe they have better passwords as a result. Maybe it's a bad impact. I get frustrated sometimes because I use a password manager. Password managers generate really strong passwords, like way stronger than I would ever pick myself. And but if the kind of format of the password manager doesn't match the policy of the website, like they want a special character, but the password manager's like just putting in letters and numbers and dashes, then I have to like go back to like making a password up for that website. And I probably actually do a worse job. So it's probably less secure than if they just let me use my password manager. Another kind of policy that's actually really good, it makes a lot of sense, is the website has a list of common passwords or passwords that they've seen in leaks. And if you try to register a password that's on the list, then it says no. So it says, password managers also like do this kind of thing. I get warnings from Apple all the time about like, oh, this password's now in a leak, you need to change it. Most websites have some sort of privacy policy, not just websites, like businesses, universities, like lots of people like that. So things that govern. So the word policy is there. So it could be more of a legal kind of policy that we could be talking about. There was a time a while ago now when Facebook first turned on two-factor authentication. This was like before Google Authenticator and Microsoft Authenticator were popular. So they would just send a message to your SMS. The problem is you have to give your phone number to get the SMS response. Facebook, being in the business of gathering a lot of data about people and selling that data and monetizing it, they now had your phone number. And they knew it worked. They knew it was current because you needed it to log in. It can't be like the phone number that you had 5 years ago. And so that just made their data better and more valuable because now they have phone numbers to go along with it. And so there was pushback against them for doing that. They said it was just for security. That's why they were doing it. But then people were skeptical that maybe that wasn't the only reason. Apple in iPhones, iPads probably too, they introduced a policy called NeuroMatch, a software. So the idea here was to stop images of children, sexual exploitation, like child pornography of children. And so if you use the camera on an iPhone, I guess it's still there today. So if you use a camera on the iPhone, what the software will do is it will look at the picture really quickly. It will run it through an AI neural net, and it will try and decide whether it looks like child pornography or not. If it does, then it will notify law enforcement. And if it doesn't, then it's fine, then it just goes to your phone. And so this is a policy. It's obviously good intentioned, something that everyone wants, but it also creates problems like false positives. So once they turned this on, there was like in the news, there were all these articles, like there was a parent that took a picture of their kid because it had a rash, and they were sending it to their doctor. And so this got flagged, but it wasn't just like, oh, you can't send that picture, we're going to delete the picture. It's like now the police are coming, and the police want to understand this, and you have to deal with the police because you were trying to get medical services for your child or things like that. So policies can, you have to think through the consequences of policies. There was another case, sort of famous law case, that had to do with URL address manipulation. So imagine a URL that kind of looks like this. You have some bank and you see something that looks like this. This is something that we're going to talk about a little later, actually the next two classes, URLs that are sort of structured like this. It's called RESTful APIs. But anyways, just based on your experiences using the web, what does this URL look like? So you have the domain, but the actual page itself, we have this weird question mark. We have profile equals 741. What does that mean to you, if anything? Okay, so this is like, I'm looking at my bill or something, and according to the website, my profile is 741. So this is a URL that's personalized to me. So when I go to the URL, it shows me bill number 741, or for customer 741. So that's like an input parameter, and the website is taking that as an input, and then it's deciding what to show me based on what that input is. Okay, almost every website uses this now. Okay, so there's other ways of doing it. Like you go to the website first, and it kind of remembers like what you are, or who you are, and then it kind of carries that information forward. But now what we do is we just put everything in the URL, and like I say, we'll talk more about it. Now, if I see a URL like this, and I just go into Safari, like into the address bar, and I change 741 to 742, what do you think happens? Okay, so maybe something bad happens, but it doesn't know that I'm not customer 742, right? So probably it's going to show me another customer's profile, okay? Now, ideally, we would implement this in a secure way so that I could only see my own. Maybe these are like really long numbers, random numbers, so I can't guess someone else's. But in the earlier days, what would happen is websites would just use sequential numbers. So if you wanted to see someone else's document, you would just change this number and then you could see it, okay? So there was one person who did this for AT&T, which is a big telecom in the US, and it was for their bills. And they wrote a little Python script that would just go through the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And every time they would go, they would get a bill. The bill would have the person's name. It would have personal information like their address, because it was a phone bill, their telephone number, maybe some banking information, probably not like their full details, but maybe the last 4 digits of their credit card or something like that. And then they were actually charged criminally for doing it. So AT&T noticed in their logs that someone was asking for all of these things. They went to the police. The police arrested the person. They said it was hacking. The person said, no, it's not hacking. I'm just literally typing in a URL. Like the company is showing that information to anyone that asks for it, right? That's not hacking. And then the courts sort of said, well, because you wrote a Python script, if you did it manually, it wouldn't be hacking. But because you wrote a Python script to do it, then it crossed the line into being hacking. And so they went to jail for it. Now, they weren't a very good person otherwise, so there were a lot of like kind of other circumstances, extenuating circumstances, but that was like kind of like a famous case with it. But anyways, the policy was like, how are you going to show people their billing information, especially if you don't want them to log in. You just want them to click a link on the email. It shows it to them. They didn't have to put their username and password in, so it's a lot quicker. You give them a unique URL, and then that is what would make that work. Another thing you hear about is swatting. So this is the idea that if I don't like someone, I'll phone the police, or usually like 911 or emergency number, and I'll act as if there's like a really horrific crime that's happening at the address of that person. And that will cause the police to show up. The police don't know whether it's real or fake, so they have to come in assuming that it's real. And SWAT is like when police, when they have like the army gear on with the helmets and the pads and bulletproof vests and things like that, fully automatic weapons. And so they'll come in. It's very intimidating if you get swatted because you don't expect it. All of a sudden the police are there. They're not knocking on your door politely. They're coming in an emergency situation. So they're just kicking your door, yelling at you with guns and things like that. Sometimes accidents happen. People get shot by mistake. So there's all sorts of things that happen. So this is a policy, but you have to think through the policy. Well, what if the police don't respond that way? And it is an actual emergency, right? Then then the police are going to be criticized for not responding, urgently enough. Okay, so it's sort of they're stuck. So sometimes policies, you're going to have false positives and you're going to have false negatives, and you have to balance the two. And so that's another consideration with policies. AirTags are another thing. So AirTag, I have one somewhere in my bag. I'm sure you've seen them all. It's just like a little, let's see if I can find it. Very, very, very small device that lets you track things. So this is the size of it. Looks like a coin. Okay. How does this track? So I keep this in my bag. So the idea is that I leave my bag somewhere. I can go on my phone and it will show me where my bag is. So how would you guess that works from a technology perspective? Okay, so the easiest thing would be this thing has a GPS in it. Okay, so that would work. What else does it need? Is a GPS enough? What else would it need? Okay, so it would have to have some sort of, let's just call it an internet connection, vaguely, okay? So this thing would have to have a GPS, it would have to have like a satellite internet connection, because it wouldn't necessarily be on Wi-Fi, because I could leave my bag anywhere. Then it could transmit its device, okay? Now, those things exist. What you just came up with, they exist, but they do not look like this, okay? They're gonna look like a much bigger device because they have a GPS and they have transmission things, okay? This is like way dumber than that. This has no GPS in it, and it has no internet connection. Okay, it has a Bluetooth connection, so it can connect to devices, but that's it. Okay, so how does this work? It doesn't have an internet connection, it doesn't have a GPS, it doesn't know where it is, and it doesn't have internet access, yet somehow it works. So the way it works is it hopes that wherever I leave my bag and wherever this is, there's somebody else with an iPhone. If someone else has an iPhone and they're within distance of this, say 20 meters, I can make a Bluetooth connection to their iPhone. It's not me. This is my tag, but I'm talking to your phone because you're the person that's there, okay? And that phone has a GPS and that phone has an internet connection, okay? So this talks to someone else's iPhone, and their iPhone gets the GPS and it updates the database of where this AirTag is. Okay, so that's how the protocol works. It works because Apple makes the AirTag and Apple makes the iPhone, and so it can make it so that your iPhone and my AirTag can talk together even though we're not the same person, and you really can't do anything about it. If you own an iPhone, you're the iPhone for every AirTag that belongs to you and every AirTag that doesn't belong to you. Okay, it's just baked into the protocol of Apple. Yeah. So this will connect to an iPhone that has an internet connection and a GPS. That phone, on behalf of this, will update Apple. It'll basically phone Apple and say, I just saw this AirTag at this location. And then Apple will update their database and show it to me, only to me. So you don't know that this belongs to me or anything like that. Yeah. Okay. So anyway, that's why it can be so small. So this is like, basically it's a battery. Like the size of the battery that's in this is probably 90% of the form factor. And then there's a little bit of circuitry on top. There's even a speaker, you can like make it like ring if you like lose something and things like that. Okay, so super, super small. Now, when these things came out, there was a big problem. It's still a problem, which is that people would use them for stalking. So you see someone, you want to know where they live or where they go or whatever, you slip in their bag, you slip in their pocket. It's pretty small, they don't notice it. You could classically do this anyways with a GPS unit, but they're expensive. The other thing about this is super inexpensive. Well, they're not cheap either, but compared to a GPS unit, they're cheap, right? So I don't know what like a GPS tracker would cost. I imagine it probably costs a couple $100. And then you might have to like get a SIM card and pay for data. I don't know how it works. But these things are about $30. So you can get like 3 for $100 kind of thing. So anyways, so people would use them for stalking. If they lost it, it was okay. Like they would just get another one or whatever. It wasn't like a huge monetary investment. So then Apple said, okay, we need to change our policy around this. We have to do something about this. We like this technology. People like it. They want to know where their stuff is. On the other hand, we don't want to allow stalking, right? So like, what can we come up with a policy that tries to do both? Now, not everyone was fully satisfied with the policy, but the policy is as follows. If I'm moving around and there's an AirTag that's always, like I'm always connected to it, like say I sit down here, my phone, I have a phone in my pocket, some of you may have AirTags. I'm connected to your AirTag, that's fine, your AirTag's connected to my phone, okay? But when I leave and start going home, if your AirTag is going with me, then it looks like either we're walking together or you're following me, right? Or you're stalking me, or you put the AirTag on me, okay? So then what it will do is it will show you a warning that basically says, we found an AirTag, it's moving with you, it's not yours. We won't tell you whose it is, but we know it's not yours. And then you can see there's the warning says, the location of this AirTag can be seen by the owner. Your current location can be seen by the owner of this AirTag. This AirTag may be attached to an item you are borrowing. If this AirTag is not familiar to you, you can disable it and stop sharing your location. Okay, so you can then disable it, and it will. I'm not sure exactly what that means. It definitely won't talk to your phone anymore. So your phone will stop replying on its behalf. I don't know if it disables it for everything. That would make more sense. But then also, you might have attacks where someone like walks with you just to disable your AirTag or something like that. I'm not sure the actual details of what disabled means, but you can definitely stop it from tracking your phone or have your phone track it. So this happens, like, for example, I have it on my keys. My wife takes the vehicle. She has the keys with me. She's getting this warning all the time, like that my AirTag's going along with her, kind of thing. Yeah.
Would this warn if someone stole my bag? Would this warn them that it's being tracked?
Yeah. So the you can't. Yeah. So it would, yes, in that sense. Yeah. That's correct. That's correct. So yeah, if someone stole your bag and you had an AirTag and they had an iPhone, first off, they're kind of doing you a service at first because they have their iPhone that's letting you track the location of it. But then eventually they'll see this warning as well. Then they know they have to go digging for the AirTag. Yeah, I think most people that steal things are aware that these things exist now, and so they're sort of like. They either don't care because it doesn't matter in the end. Like the other thing is, even if you track it, there's lots of stories about people who've got their bike stolen or things like that where they can track it. They can go to the police and show them a map of where it is, but the police just don't have time to, it's a laptop, it's a bike, it's not major crime. And so they don't do anything. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So even cars, which is a big thing too. Yeah. They don't have the capacity, or also it's like it's not the kind of place where you can just show up as a single police officer if it's like a big car stealing ring or something like that. Yeah. Okay. Another example. There was a nice paper called "Security Policy Audits: Why and How." Kind of raised the question of like why aren't we talking more about policies? They're really important. But security people like spend a lot of time thinking about other stuff. So they did one study of SIM swapping. So what's SIM swapping? Does anyone, can anyone tell me what a SIM is? What does it have to do with?
The card that gives the number of my phone.
Okay, so it has to do with phones, the phone network, cell phones particularly. And it's kind of like the mapping between your phone number and your physical device. Okay, so let's say you call me, you type in my phone number, you press call. That goes to Bell, because I'm with Bell. And the phone numbers are kind of like IP addresses, so everyone knows in the protocol, they know that that's a Bell phone number. They don't know it's me, they just know it's a Bell customer. Then Bell looks at it, and they say, okay, that's Jeremy Clark. That's great, but I need to make his physical iPhone ring, right? So like, where is he in the network? And people lose phones, they update phones. So you could attach a phone number to a phone, but that's like inconvenient because if you lose your phone, you lose your phone number. Then everyone has to learn a new phone number for you, okay? So what they do instead is they create like a temporary phone number, which is like a SIM number, okay? And so they map my phone number to my SIM number, and my SIM number is what's in my phone. So my phone usually has like a physical SIM chip, like it's a chip that's in my phone, and it rings because that SIM card is in my phone. Okay. Now there's eSIM, so you can update them, and if I change my SIM card, then I'm changing my phone number, right? So sometimes if you travel somewhere and you don't want to pay Bell rates for international roaming, you'll get a SIM card that's local there. You have a new phone number, you're on the network there, right? And then you can just switch the SIM back, okay? So a SIM card is what binds your physical phone to your phone number. It's kind of like the binding between the two of them. So what they did is, now if I can convince Bell to change the SIM number associated with your phone number to a SIM that I control, then I'm going to get all of your phone calls. Okay? Why do I care about getting all your phone calls? Well, I might care about talking to the people that you talk to or whatever. But now with a lot of two-factor authentication, especially when it goes over SMS, that also is another reason to try and get your phone number. If I can get your phone number and I have your password, now I can break into your accounts, even if they're using two-factor authentication, if it's SMS based. Okay? So there was a period of time, now this is also behind the drive towards a standalone authentication app, whether it's Google, whether it's Microsoft, whether it's Apple's built-in authenticator. They wanted to get it off the phone network because it was too easy to get that second factor. So what these people did is they would just call up all the major telecoms in the US, and they would say, I want to change my SIN number, or I want to change my phone number. And it says a change of phone number. It was like they want to map an existing phone number to a SIM number, so that's a more accurate description. But 39 out of 50 of the people that they called, it worked. And they didn't say who they were. I should have said that up front. So they just called. They said, I want to change it, but they didn't identify themselves. The only thing they did is they used what would be publicly known about someone. So you might know my name. That's fine. It's publicly known. If you dug a bit, you might know my address. You probably don't know my credit card number. There's stuff that you would know about me and stuff that you wouldn't. So just using public information, they were able to succeed in 39 of 50 attempts. And so the way they would authenticate was kind of bad in some cases. So an example of a bad policy was the following. They would say, okay, we need to make sure that you actually own this phone number. It's actually yours. So tell me the last 3 calls that you received. What numbers were those 3 calls from? And if the person could tell them, then they would believe that they were the real person. And if you couldn't tell them, then they would think it's an attacker that's impersonating it. Now, if you look at this, can you think of why this isn't a good policy? So I want to know that this is actually you and it's actually your phone number. So I just ask you, who's the last 3 people that called you? Okay, so the attacker, let's say I'm an attacker pretending to be you. What I do is I call your phone number 3 times. Now I know who called you the last 3 times. Then I call AT&T or whoever it is. And then, so it breaks that policy. Okay, now the flaw here in this policy, we will start thinking about putting our finger on what the flaw is. In this case, you're basing authentication on data that the adversary can control. The adversary can control the last 3 phone calls that you made, or received. Not made, but received. And so because it's adversarially controlled, we don't want to base authentication decisions on it. So that's sort of one axiom of designing a good policy. Later, again, the slides are out of order, but from when I originally made them. But so in a couple lectures, one of the last lectures of the class, you'll see this exact same attack happen again in an example called @mat. It's the same concept of the adversary can control some data, and so they're able to authenticate on your behalf. Another thing that they discovered is that sometimes SIMs are recycled. So so sometimes you'll get a new phone number, new SIM card, but you'll get old text messages from the person who had that phone number before you. So anyways, that's a problem with two-factor authentication, and you might be able to do password recovery or that type of stuff using the old number. So here's some just news story articles. So cryptocurrency is one area where two-factor authentication over SMS protected a lot of people's accounts. And so SIM swapping was very popular attack geared towards stealing people's crypto, like their Bitcoin and things like that. And so there's lots of stories about, millions of dollars of Bitcoin being lost, where SIM swapping was like one of the components, the main component of the attack. One other example of a policy, this one's more funny than anything. So this concerns USPS, which is the United States Postal Service, so Canada Post, but in the US. So in the US, sometimes you move. And so if you move, you want to have your mail that was sent to your old address be forwarded to your new address. So that's fine. So they have a way of allowing for it. So what they do is they have a paper form. You fill it out. You say, this is my current address. This is the address I'm moving to. And I want the mail forwarded from my old address to my new address. You don't have to prove anything to submit this form. Anyone can submit this form. They don't check your ID or anything like that. They're not going to just do it. So you'll see in a second. They have a policy for making sure that you can't hijack someone's mail. But it's not something that happens at this stage. Okay, so they're not checking ID. Anyone can drop the form off. You can maybe even submit it electronically. So this is their policy. So what they do is they send 2 postcards, one to the old address and one to the new address. And it basically says somebody's requesting this mail service forwarding to happen. And if you don't like it, call us or go to this website or something like that. If you don't recognize like what's happening here, go to this website or phone us or whatever, and you can stop it. Otherwise, if we don't hear from you, then we'll assume everything's good, and then we'll start it like maybe 2 weeks later. We'll start forwarding all the mail. Okay. Now let's say you do want to hijack someone's mail, so you're an attacker. Is this a good policy or a bad policy? It's a bad policy. I wouldn't be showing it if it wasn't. What could you do as an attacker to try and hijack someone's mail if this is the policy? Okay. Yeah. So great. So what we can do is if the postcard that goes to the new address, that's fine. That's ours. So that's okay. The postcard that goes to the old address, we have to stop it from reaching the old address. If it never reaches the old address, or if the person never looks at it or whatever, then the policy goes through. Okay. So what we could do is we could try to hijack it, like stop it. We could pick it out of their mailbox when we see it go by. We could even just let it go through and just hope that they don't notice it and they don't do anything. Okay. So this is an example of what we call allow override, meaning that if you don't hear anything, then you assume it's all good. Okay, so a lot of security policies, it's like I need to explicitly hear from every party that they're okay with it. Then I'll make the security change. This is the opposite. It's like I'm going to notify everyone, and if I don't hear anything back and I don't hear any complaints, then I'm going to assume everything's good and I'm going to proceed with it. Okay. The problem with these types of attacks is denial of service prevents it. So if you never hear about the notification, then you don't complain. And if you don't complain, they assume everything is good, and so they go ahead with the change anyways. Have we seen this before? An allow override policy? Something where if we don't hear back, we just assume everything's good? We try, but if we don't hear back. So where we've seen this before is with revoked certificates. So with certificate revocation, we check whether the certificate's revoked, we ask, but if we don't hear anything back, we just assume that it's not revoked. So that was the OCSP responder. So allow override is like one of these themes that show up in security. Okay, so the attack is you could, either try and drop the postcard yourself, or you can just hope that it gets ignored, misunderstood. It could just get lost and never delivered. There's a bunch of things that could happen to it. So anyway, there was a story in TechCrunch about this flaw. and they weren't fixing it. And it had a really funny story in it, so I thought I would tell you the story. It's kind of long, but I'll just read it. So in a particularly comical case from 2017, an Atlanta resident was arrested for cashing checks that he had rerouted from the corporate headquarters of shipping giant UPS. So UPS is not USPS. USPS is the Postal Service. UPS is like FedEx it's a private corporation, resulting in literal bathtubs of mail piling up outside the hapless fraudster's apartment. Yet it still took nearly 3 months for UPS to notice that its mail wasn't showing up. So he did this attack. He did it on UPS. They probably sent the postcard, but UPS was just getting so much mail that they never noticed it. Or maybe the person looked at it, but like they don't have the authority to know whether this is right or wrong. So maybe they were going to ask their boss, who was going to ask their boss, and somehow it got lost. Okay, so who knows what happened? And then imagine like a big corporate headquarters, all the mail that's going there, all of a sudden is going to like someone's house, like their apartment, right? And so as it says, like their bathtub was like piling up with mail because they had more mail than they could do with it. Some of them were checks. They started cashing the checks. And then as a result, the police were notified. And the police didn't realize that it was like something to do with mail rerouting at all. They just showed up because the checks were cashed. And then they noticed all the mail in the bathtub, and then they investigated. And UPS, 3 months later, they still didn't know that their mail was missing. Again, it's probably because there's probably someone in the mailing room who thinks it's unusual, but for that information to go to the top of the company, it gets lost somewhere along the way. Okay, how could we fix this flaw? So we could say that you can't change the address. You can't even request a change unless if you can prove that you live at the old address. The other thing we could do is switch from allow override to the opposite, which is deny override. So now instead of, if we don't hear from you, we assume everything's good. It's like we have to hear from you before we assume that it's good. So we're going to send you a password or a code or something like that. And if the old and the new don't both put that code into our website, then we're not going to instigate the forwarding. Okay, now we'll do a kind of longer example, which is airports and security. So this is something I assume everyone in the room has flown at some point, so you're probably familiar with this. And there's a lot of security policies that are at play. Hopefully you'll learn things that you didn't know before about airport security. And okay, so let's take a flight somewhere in the world. And I'm going to go and, I want to take this flight. So what's the very first thing that I do? Okay, so I could check at the gate before I check to the gate. Okay, book the ticket. So let's go all the way back to the start. So I'm going to go and I'm going to buy the ticket itself. So I go on the website, whatever, I'm flying to Bologna, Italy from Montreal. I have some options. I'm going to purchase the ticket. All right, what do I have to do when I buy a ticket other than spend the money? Sorry? Have a bank account? Yep. So I have to have the money and have a bank account in Canada or some way of paying Air Canada. Okay, so usually they want to know who I am, right? So I'm going to have to identify myself. Because I'm booking online, I'm not going to physically show my passport to someone, but they might ask like what my number is or something like that. I type it in and they're able to identify me. Sometimes there's other codes, like there's security codes. There's something called a known passenger ID. There's different things that you would see. I have a Nexus card, so I could put my Nexus card ID in, things like that. Okay, let's say I buy a ticket. I can't go to Italy, so I've already spent the money. It's gone, so I can just give it to you and you can fly, right? No, so everyone's shaking their heads.
Details, then you can hand it over. But if you have provided your information, then it's gonna create some problems.
Yeah, okay. So basically a ticket is non-transferable. So when I buy a ticket, it's in my name. I can't give it to anyone else. I could cancel it, book a new ticket under your name, but that's like, it's a different ticket at that point. So tickets are tied to my name. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll walk up to Expedia or maybe directly to Air Canada. I'll depart with my money. I'll put in my ID information. Then usually different things work different ways. But say you book on Expedia, it might take like a day before you'll get a confirmation like, okay, that you purchased this, but like the airline hasn't confirmed your ticket or something like that. And then maybe a few days later, you get like a confirmation email saying, okay, everything's confirmed. Okay. Now what's happening behind the scenes for that confirmation? What the airline is doing is they're giving your ID to the government, some agency within the government, and the government maintains a list of people who are not allowed to fly. Okay, usually some link to terrorism or something like that, some crime, major crime. And so they're checking whether you're on the no-fly list, and that's why you have to identify yourself, and that's why you can't transfer your ticket either. So if I'm not on the no-fly list, I book a ticket, but then I give it to someone who is on the no-fly list, then the government hasn't checked that against their list at all. Okay. Now let's say you are on the no-fly list. What happens? Yeah. So let's answer that in two ways. I'm booking the ticket in Canada. This is going to the Canadian government. So it's not being shared with other governments. It's just the Canadian government. Okay. But the list itself is the list just the things that the Canadian government, the people that the Canadian government knows about, or is it other governments themselves? And so that's up to the country itself. There's a lot of secrecy around this, so like not everyone knows everything about it, but through like leaks and things like that, we know that we at least share lists with the United States. And the United States have a bigger list, and so that's one of the lists that we subscribe to. There's 5 countries called the Five Eyes countries that share intelligence. So we're going to have a common list with those 5 countries anyways, and then there could be other sharing that goes on beyond that. So the Trusted Traveler Program it's a little bit different. There's sort of like 3 things that happen. So you can fly as like with no affiliation with any partnership, period. Okay, so that's the first way you can fly. The second way you can fly is you can enroll in, I said I'm a part of Nexus, so Nexus is one of those like TTP programs. And so that basically says that the government does some pre-screen clearing of you. So I had to go in and interview. I had to interview in Canada, and I had to interview in the US. So I had to talk to like law enforcement in Canada, and then I had to talk to law enforcement in the US, but I did it in Montreal because they have a, like, when you cross through the US, you're kind of like in the US when you're going through customs in Montreal, the way it works. And so, yeah, they'll interview you. They have your record anyway, electronic. They'll ask you about what countries you've been to and whatever they want to ask. Then you're either approved or you're not approved. And all that does is it alleviates the amount of security scrutiny that I get when I go through the airport. So it doesn't, it does check the no-fly list as well. So I'm definitely not on the no-fly list. But then also I can skip security lines and use a terminal instead of talking to someone. And they can always intervene and pull you aside anyways, but that's more or less what that's for. Yeah. So global entry, they're all like kind of the same thing. And then there's something else called a known traveler identifier. And that I'll talk about in one slide. Okay, so the government will either allow or deny you to it. Okay, now another thing that happens when you buy a ticket is you're assigned a unique code that represents your ticket. Okay, so you've probably seen it on your stuff. Sometimes you have to type it in when you like check in to your flights and things like that. We call it a boarding pass. The technical term for it is a PNR, passenger name record. It's 6 characters long. A booking code is common. It's not a random 6 characters. So some of the characters represent the airline that you're flying with, maybe the airport that you're flying out with, and then there'll be some random numbers as well. So it's sort of a mix of things. Now, this PNR is like everywhere. So like if you're holding your boarding pass, your PNR is printed on it. If you have luggage, you get the bag tags, you put the bag tags on it, your PNR is on it. You're standing in line with your phone open on the like boarding pass app. It's there. It's like basically everywhere on you. Okay. So what became a problem is that let's say you want to do something with your flight. You want to cancel it, you want to change it, you want to rebook it, you want to make sure you're getting the loyalty points for it, any of those types of things. The basic way to authenticate that it's you is just to ask you what this code is. So you go to the website, you don't even talk to someone, you just type in a website. It will say like, what's your last name and what's your booking code? If you can cough up those two pieces of information, then you can basically do anything. You can modify a flight, you can steal someone's loyalty points or things like that. So what people could do is they could walk through the airport. A lot of times people are pulling the bags behind them anyways. They have a tag, the code is there, right? Like you walk behind them, you take a picture real quick or whatever, you have, I don't know, Google Glasses or something, Meta glasses, and you get the code, then you could, there's not like a huge profit motive, but you could at least grief them by like canceling their flight. But you could also steal their loyalty points and things like that. Okay, so the PNR is actually kind of like a password, but it's not treated as a password at all. It's like printed on everything, and people don't try to hide it or anything like that. And then even if I want to guess your PNR, I could probably do it without that much effort because the code is so structured. So like, because some of it's the airline, like if I know you're taking a flight on a certain day, I know what maybe airplane flight you're on, then I could just exhaustively search some of the numbers to try and find. And sometimes I don't care about targeting you, I just want to get anyone that's on that flight. So I just put in possible PNR codes for people that are on that flight. I do a quick exhaustive search and I'm going to hit someone pretty soon. Okay, so we bought our ticket. We have our PNR. Our name has been submitted to the government. What's the next step? Just guess. If you're wrong, I'll say back up or you've gone too far. Okay, so we're going to go to the airport. So that is the next step. And then what's the first thing that we do when we get to the airport?
Check-in.
Okay, and what does check-in mean?
Going to the concerned authority, like the ticket company. Then we hand over the tickets and they give us the boarding pass.
Okay. So the input to it is some sort of, I'm on this flight. The output of it is a boarding pass. That's the deliverable that we want. And the person that we talk to could be one of three things. So we could go to an actual human being, to the counter. We could do it at a kiosk, like these kinds of things. Then we don't necessarily have to talk to a human. Or what we could do is we could even do it online from our phones like the day before. And if everything goes fine, then we don't even have to, we can sort of skip this step. We already have our boarding pass when we reach the airport itself. Okay. Does our ID ever get checked at this step? So if I go up to the human counter, they usually will ask for my passport. Okay. And so they'll probably do an ID check. If I do the kiosk, I might have to scan my passport so it has a copy of my passport, but it doesn't check it against my face, generally. Okay, so different airlines work different ways, but 90% of the time it's not going to check my face. It's not going to take a picture of me or something like that. Okay, if I do it from my phone, I'm definitely not, no one's looking at my face at all. Okay, so anybody more or less could check into a flight. It doesn't necessarily have to be the person who is the ticket's issued to in their name. Okay, so keep that in mind for later. Now let's say you are on the no-fly list. You might think, well, you'll never get your ticket in the first place, or they'll tell you that it's canceled. Usually they don't work that way because the people who are on airline or no-fly lists, sometimes law enforcement are looking for them. And so what they want to do is they want you to come to the airport. So usually you'll get like a message that just says like there's a problem with online check-in. You have to go to the counter or something like that. And sometimes you have to do that anyways. Like I've had to go to the counter because of some issue that had nothing to do with being on the no-fly list. But anyways, that's the kind of thing that you'll do. You'll go up to the counter, and then that's when you'll learn that you're on the no-fly list. So at check-in time, Air Canada will have already received authorization from the government, and then they'll either allow you or deny you, and then they may alert law enforcement as well. So we know a bit about this because there's lots of cases. So this is one child. His name is Adam Ahmad, And he comes in the news like I've seen at least 3 articles at different ages because it keeps happening to him. But he is on the no-fly list, sort of. Okay, if you look at him, does he look like someone that should be on the no-fly list? No. Okay. Does he look like a terrorist? Probably not. A little young, right? So why do you think he's on the no-fly list? If you had to guess. Okay, so it's based on his name itself. Okay, so his name, maybe his full family name, matches someone who is on the list, but he's clearly not the same person itself. Okay, and so yeah, in the news, it's like it happened like maybe 3 times where he was denied. The family doesn't learn it until they go to the airport. So it's when they're checking in, then they learn about it, and then they say, "Oh, we've been through that," right? But the problem with it is because it's a government list, it's the spy agencies, there's no process for anything. At least there wasn't traditionally a process. So then there was a movement to, first off, if you're under a certain age, it doesn't matter whether you're on the no-fly list or not, you're not on it, kind of thing. And then now there's a new thing called the known traveler identity or known passenger identity. So if you go through this process, what they'll do is they'll assign you a number. So you're no longer your name, you're a number. And then when you book the ticket, you have to type that number in. And then they check that number and they say, okay, that's not the same person who's on the no-fly list itself. So that was like the sort of way that goes around it. So sometimes you'll see when you're booking your tickets, it'll be like, do you have a known traveler's number identification? I think it's called KTI, known traveler identification. That's what it's for. Okay, another thing, there was a question of like who's on the no-fly list. So the Canadian government have one. This came out in terms of a leak that there was a list called TwoScan. TwoScan was a US list that Canada was subscribing to. It had 680,000 names on it, which is a lot. It's a lot more than you would expect on a no-fly list. And 40% when you go through the list had no known affiliation to terrorism at all. Okay, they were on the list. We don't know why. Well, we sort of know why in a second. How do you get on the list? So any law enforcement in the US can just fill out a form and put you on this list. So they would do it for anyone. Like say there was someone they were investigating for like drug trafficking or something like that. They can throw them on the list. Now they can't travel, so they don't have to worry about them. They can still like drive across the border or something like that, but it basically restricts them. And essentially, so it's really, really easy to get a name on the list. Can you get a name off of the list? It turns out you can't really do it. You would have to sue the government, take them to court, and then maybe you get off the list and maybe you don't. And if you're Canada and the list is on the US list, right, then you basically have to go to the US. The government of Canada would have to go to the US and say, can you please take this name off the list? And then the US government would have to say yes or no. So they have no obligation to listen to Canada at all. Okay, so this whole like no-fly list thing was kind of a mess, or it still is maybe to an extent a mess today. Okay, so now that we've checked in, we get our boarding pass. Okay, so our boarding pass will have a bunch of stuff on it. So for example, it might have my name. Here's that confirmation code, LDBN50. So that's the thing I was talking about. So with these 2 pieces of information, if I can get a picture of your boarding pass, then I can change your flight information or whatever. I can probably log into the airline and do something to it. There's a boarding group. There's this thing called TSA Pre. There's the gate number, all this stuff. You've seen boarding passes before. What's a boarding group? Does anyone know what that is? Okay, so eventually when you get on the plane, instead of having everyone go up at once, they sort of do it sort of in an ordered way. Generally speaking, would you rather be like the first to board a plane or the last to board a plane? Why? Faster. Okay, faster, but then you have to wait on the plane.
Yeah, but it's already simple.
Okay, so you're at least sitting in a comfortable seat, so that's better. Yeah, anything else? Okay, why?
In terms of free upgrades, maybe sometimes.
Okay.
Also,
Okay.
I think that's because they start filling up the back, the end of the plane. So when you're in the last group, you go in the front, so you exit earlier than everyone else when the plane.
Sure. Now let's assume though that your seat is assigned, so it doesn't matter. You're going to be sitting where you're sitting, period. Yeah.
It doesn't matter because the flight's gonna fly the same way.
Okay, is there any problem that you have if you show up late? Other than like the plane leaving? Okay, so baggage space is probably the big one, right? So I like to board early because I can get my bag in there. If I wait too long, then it fills up. And yeah, so it's just a minor thing, but anyways, so that's the boarding group. What about TSA pre? Does anyone recognize that or know what that is?
The safety of like I heard this term in terms of the luggage.
Yeah.
Like there's a universal key for.
Okay, so we'll talk about that in a sec. That's not this, but that's a good thing. We'll talk about that in 2 slides. But that thing, that key that you're thinking of, belongs to the TSA. Does anyone know what the TSA is or what TSA means? So TSA are the police officers in an airport. Okay, so they're called the TSA. In Canada, we call them CTTSA. And they're not law enforcement specifically, but they're like law enforcement in a lot of regards. They have a lot of power themselves. But their job is just about airport security. That's all they do. They don't like leave when they leave the airport. They don't have any authority anywhere else. Okay, pre-check. It just means that I'm on one of those programs where sometimes when you line up at the metal detectors, there's like a fast lane and there's a slow lane, and the fast lane is for people who have been sort of pre-approved, or there's a variety of reasons why you'd be in the fast lane. So that's what TSA pre is. It's the US name of what that program is. So it just means that you can use the fast lane. You might not have to take your shoes off or do a bunch of things in that line. Okay, what's this here? Okay, a barcode, QR code. In this case, it's literally a barcode. All right, so the barcode is, what would you imagine is in the barcode?
Maybe they check whether the boarding pass is fake or not.
Okay, so is the boarding pass fake or not? So what I'd like to see in the barcode is probably like a copy of all the information that's printed on here. And then to make sure it's fake or not, how would you do that?
Maybe they have a device to scan it when you.
Let's assume that that's the case. So, and you've probably seen it, you hand the boarding pass, they scan it with like some sort of phone or something. Okay, so a signature, okay, a digital, like a hand signature, where it'd be a digital signature, right? Okay, so what I'd like to do is I'd like to see this information. I'd like to see it signed, it's put here. Then people can't fake this information. If it's not signed, what could I do? I could print out a boarding pass. I could write anything I want on it. It doesn't, like, the airline knows what seat belongs to me, so I could change my seat number, but it doesn't mean anything. When I get on the plane, I'm not going to be in the right seat. But boarding pass, they're not like scanning it to make sure I'm not lying about my boarding group. So if I want to board the plane first, I just write boarding group 1 on my fake ticket, and no one's going to double check that. TSA pre, same thing. If I want the fast lane, I just write TSA pre on my fake boarding pass, and then I can go through. Okay, I could change my name and things like that, but eventually, if I have to show a passport and my boarding pass, then maybe I get caught having a fake name. Okay, but there's nothing stopping me from changing the name on it, other than the digital signature that would be in this barcode. Okay, do you think there's a digital signature in this barcode? Probably. Okay, I can tell you there is not just by looking at this. Okay, the reason I know there is not is because digital signatures are actually kind of big. They take a lot of data. This isn't even a QR code, it's just like a normal 2D barcode. There is not enough space. If I went to put a digital signature on this, it would take up like half of the ticket, like just to cram it. Hashing doesn't help in this case. Yeah, it doesn't help because the reader would have to have the original signature to check whether it matches the hash or not. Think about it. If you don't understand, I can talk to you about the crypto. But.
The data is written on the barcode, then the reader could basically hash the data it gets and then check if the signature is correct.
But it can't check the signature if it only has a hash of it.
No. I mean, you hash the data that's on the barcode.
Yeah. But what I'm saying is the data on the barcode is too big with a signature. Oh, no, I see what you're saying. You want to sign a hash. But yeah, but what I'm telling you is that if you, first off, you always sign a hash. So like in digital signatures, you never sign raw data ever. So every digital signature you'll ever see is a sign of a hash. So your digital signature is always the same size. It doesn't matter how big the data is, but the size that comes out even after you've done the trick of signing the hash is still too big. It's still going to be too big, yeah, to fit on this. Okay. The other problem with this is, let's say there was a digital signature. That means that someone had to sign it. And that means the private key for Air Canada, it's sitting on the kiosk, right? Like, because the kiosk is printing this thing out. Do you want the private key sitting on the kiosk in every kiosk in every airport across Canada, having a private key sit there? What if someone breaks in and steals that private key, right? So there's a whole like key thing that also it makes it complicated, like how you manage the keys and things like that. So that's probably the reason why, but what I can tell you is there's no security on the boarding pass itself. If you want to change the information, you can change the information. Okay. And usually there's nothing fancy about the barcode either. Like you could just read it with a standard reader and you would be able to parse it. There's no like special encoding or anything like that. Okay, so there's no message integrity on the data. Details can be spoofed. We'll come back to that later. The reason is this PKI, public key. How do you know whose key belongs to who and who has the signing key and where are they? And do you have the signing key at the time that you need to sign? All that stuff is hard. Okay, now I have my boarding pass. So I've checked in. I've got my boarding pass. What's the next thing I do?
I provide the luggage.
Okay, so let's get rid of our luggage. So I'm going to check my baggage. Okay, so the way baggage works is you first off tag it. So the kiosk or whatever will give you a tag. If you check in online, it's the one time where you can't not do something at the airport. You can't go like straight through. If you just have carry-on baggage, you don't have to do anything. But if you check the luggage, you have to get a tag. Once it's tagged with your name, it's your responsibility. Like, so if you put your tag on someone else's bag, then you're responsible for it. Or someone gives you stuff to put in your bag, it's your legal responsibility. And then what happens is your bag disappears. It goes down a conveyor belt, and you don't see it until you land, usually. And so what's happening behind the scenes? Well, there is inspection of the bags themselves. So there could be any kind of inspection. Sometimes they'll open the bags and look through it. Sometimes it's x-rays. It could be, yeah, different things. Now, what if they go to open your bag and it's locked? So this goes to what you were saying before. So if it's locked, are they going to be like, oh, sorry, I can't check that bag, it's locked? They're not going to do that, right? They're going to cut the lock, right? So now would you want to lock let's say you were traveling somewhere, would you actually want to lock your luggage maybe? Yeah, why not? Like, I mean, other people have access to it. When you get off the airplane, it's probably going around the conveyor belt a few times before you pick it up. People could sneak stuff in your luggage. You know, there's a lot of stuff that could happen. So throwing a lock on there is not bad. But the TSA will just cut it, or CTSA if they suspect something with it. So what happened is they worked out a compromise. So the compromise is that you could buy special locks that are called TSA approved locks. And the way the locks work is they have two keys. There's a key that you get that opens the lock. And if you buy 10 different locks, they'll all have 10 different keys. And then there's a master key. And the master key the TSA owns. And the TSA can use the master key to open any TSA approved lock. Then they can unlock your baggage. They can search it. Then they can put the lock back on. And then when it comes back, you know, it's still locked for you. Okay? So that was the thinking behind it. All right. Now, the problem with this is another big lesson in security. You hear about this concept a lot of like, we should just give the police like a key that unlocks everyone's encrypted communication and things like that. All it does is, okay, first off, who has to have that key? So the TSA have that key. The TSA is an organization, but like physically, like where is that key at any given time? Well, like in every airport, every TSA agent, or at least the ones that are doing the baggage, they all have to have a copy of that key. Okay? So let's say there's 50,000 TSA agents. There's 50,000 of those master keys circulating. All right? How many does it take to leak, and then everyone can open any TSA lock? It just takes one leak, right? It goes on the internet. You can 3D print it. Anyone can 3D print it. And now every single lock, every TSA approved lock you can open. Okay? So it took, I don't know, maybe a day or something like that before. And I just have to get a picture of it. If I can get a picture of a TSA lock, I can make the key, and then I can, and there's other things with the way that locks work. If I could get like 100 locks, I could probably figure out what the master key is, because it has to be some combination that opens all 100 of them. But anyways, the TSA key leaked almost immediately, and you can 3D print it yourself if you want, and it will open any lock itself. So it is good if you lose your key, then you can still get your lock opened just by doing it. But anyways, the whole thing was like a useless exercise, probably. It didn't really provide any meaningful security. Anyone that wants to break into your bag and steal your stuff, now they just have to download a key before they do it, and now that's the only thing that stops them from doing it. This is another example of it's sort of the same analogy, nothing to do with airports, but there's this concept of security clearance. So security clearance, if you get it, it gives you access to documents. And so one of the problems in the US is that there's so many people with security clearances. It's not just people who work directly for the government. You might be a security contractor that works for a third party that gives government contract services. They have security clearances. It's one of the reasons why, like you probably heard about, or we talked about it actually, the Snowden revelations. So Edward Snowden leaked a bunch of information that was classified. Why did he have access to classified information? He was not a government employee. He worked for a company, and the company had service contracts with the government, and then he had access to all of that information. Okay, so it's the same concept. If you have like a master key or a security clearance or something, and you have 100, 1,000, 1 million people that have access to it, it's going to leak. You can't keep a secret amongst 1 million people. Okay, so the other thing, sort of security consideration that happens, generally speaking, is that your baggage is physically isolated from the plane. So let's say you got up in the middle of the flight and you want to get something out of the bag that you checked. There's no physical way for you to do that. Like there's no door that goes from the cockpit or the main cabin of the airplane down to where the luggage is. Okay, so this is for a couple reasons. Part of it is security. So let's say there's a bomb or something like that. There's at least some physical isolation. Still could do a lot of damage if it goes off in the baggage compartment, but there is some physical isolation from the cabin itself. The other reason is more practical, is just that if you have humans, they have to breathe, so you have to do something to control air because you don't have air pressure at altitude. But with the baggage compartment, it doesn't matter. So it can get really cold in there. It can be not breathable. It doesn't change anything, and so they don't have to pay to like keep it all pressurized down there as well. Now, sometimes people travel with pets. I think they go in a special area that is pressurized. I don't know exactly what happens with pets, but anyways. Okay, so that's our bags. What's after we drop our bags off? Yeah.
Is there any like the 4S that they write on the boarding pass? Is it ever helped recognize someone or no?
Okay, so this is something that happens at the other end. I don't have slides about it. I should add it. That's usually added when you want to go and pick your bag up, at least in Canada. So the way it works is you land, you go through customs, and then you get a ticket, and then the ticket will have a code on it. Then you go to baggage claim, and sometimes they want to, like maybe they detected something in your bags when they were searching it back behind the scenes. The problem is when you go through customs, you don't have your bags with you already. So they could pull you aside at that time, but then they would have to go and find your bag as well and bring it to you. So instead, what they do is they don't pull you aside at that time. They let you go through, but they put a code on your
The right
pass.
on your boarding pass.
It's on a different pass. It's like another object in Canada, anyways. In Montreal, it's another ticket that you get that it's printed out by the customs kiosk that you'll use, or it's given to you by the security officer, like the Canadian security officer. Then you'll go downstairs. You'll collect your bag. And then when you're leaving with your bag, there's another check. And all they do is they collect these pieces of paper. Yeah? But they look at it. And so if they collect it and they see SSSS or whatever, like the bag codes are, then they have search rooms right beside it. And they'll redirect you to the search room. So then you go in with your bag and then they search it. Yeah. Okay, what do we do after we drop off our bags? Okay, we're going to go to security now. So like what we think of as security itself. And we finally made it there, even though there's been a lot of security and policies all the way up to this point, right? Okay, now I'm going to leave you all in suspense of what's going to happen at security for at least 10 minutes. So let's take a break. And then in 10 minutes, we'll come back and we'll go through security together and see what happens then. Hey.
I sent you a message regarding the size of the answer question two. The answer you said depends on the quality of the answer. I wanted to ask if it's possible just like to show you a small paragraph just to tell me if the quality is good enough.
Sure. So first off, I don't mark them, the TA does.
Yeah,
But
of course. It's like, I just want to know if it's the task is a bit.
it looks fine to me.
This one?
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yo.
final, we're gonna have like a practice set or something.
Probably not. I used to have them in the past, but they were kind of out of date, and so it was kind of useless, anyways. But yeah,
It will mostly be multiple choice, I guess.
yeah, short answer and multiple choice, and true false. Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah.
In terms of the project,
Yeah.
I like find every article related from like Sci-Hub or everywhere. Can I put them for ChatGPT for summarize?
Yeah. So you can use ChatGPT for anything you want. Just read the assignment description or the project, but
yeah, we have to include the
Yeah.
link to it.
Yeah.
I know, but the limits for using it. For example, we have like I want to summarize the essentials for my project.
so use it.
It's okay.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, you can use it for anything. Like there's no limit to it.
Restriction?
But
Okay.
that's the kind of thing that I would use it for myself. Would be like, can you explain this paper to me
Yeah.
and ask it questions about it and things like that.
50 pages.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no problem. Okay, we'll start again. Okay, so we're now ready to go through security itself. What's the first thing that we do when we go through security? Okay, so it's actually kind of a trick question. Before we get to that part of security, there's actually one thing that happens before. It usually happens at the start of the line. So the security will have a start of the line, and there's usually one person that's standing there, and they're going to scan your barcode before you get on, okay? So we call this pre-screening. Another thing I failed to mention, but I should have mentioned it, now this reminds me. Let's go back to the very start when you get your boarding pass. We said you could do it on your phone, you could get it to a kiosk, or you can talk to someone. Let's say you opt to talk to someone, or you have to talk to someone for whatever reason. Who are you actually talking to? They work for somebody. Who do they work for? So they're going to work for the airline itself. So if I go to the Air Canada desk, they work for Air Canada. Okay, they're not police, they're not law enforcement, they're not anything like that. They work for Air Canada. Okay, and so as we go through, we will start keeping track also of who's doing what, because there's different people that you talk to that are different. Okay, the agent that scans your pass, they're CATSA. Okay, so Transport Security Agency, they're like police or law enforcement, except for they just do airport security. That's it. They don't do anything outside of it. Okay, in Canada, they don't check your ID at this stage. Okay, so they just scan your boarding pass. Why do they scan your boarding pass? So, okay, so you sort of, because you were issued your boarding pass, you're kind of already authorized to go to, but what they can do is they can at least make sure you're in the right line. Yeah, so like you might go to the fast line, you might go to the slow line. Airports have sometimes more than one terminal. So like maybe I'm flying to the US, it's a different security gate than if I'm flying to Canada. So part of it's logistics. Another thing they do is they timestamp the fact that you are in the airport. Okay, so they now know where you are in the airport. And so sometimes, let's say there's a problem like the flight is about to leave and you're not on the plane, then they can go and they can say, oh, this person, they at least made it to the start of the security line, but then we lost track of them. Or, you know, they cleared security like an hour ago. I don't know where they are, but like they had lots and lots of time to get on the airplane, and so we're just going to leave, kind of. So it helps track you as you go through it as well. And then the third reason is that this wasn't known until it was leaked, But it turned out in the US, they did this program that cost millions and millions of dollars. And what they did is they tried to train the pre-screened people with psychological profiling so that they could potentially identify a terrorist before they go through security itself, okay? And the way they would do this is just by looking and watching for psychological signs, okay? So this program is called SPOT, and it's kind of fun, so I'll show you the actual, so I'll show you a bit about it. So you can read the whole thing on Moodle. So before I zoom in and show it to you, just think in your head. Someone comes to you and says, okay, you're going to train a bunch of TSA agents, and they're going to kind of look everyone up and down when they're coming into security line, and I want you to try and sort terrorists from non-terrorists. Does that sound like a reasonable thing to do? Does it sound like something, what would you look for? Okay, so we can see what the government came up with. So the way they implemented it was, they implemented a point system, and so if they saw certain things, then they would assign you a certain number of points. So for example, if you arrive late for your flight, you would get 1 point. If you had a bunch of people that looks like they didn't know each other, but they all have the exact same bag, then we would say that that's worth 2 points. If you have widely open staring eyes, you get 2 points. If it looks like you shaved recently or you have strong body odor, you're going to get 1 point. If you do anything that appears to be deceptive, like you have a fake mustache or you are asking about security-related things and things like that, then you'll get 3 points. So anyway, so they'll collect up a bunch of points. The idea is that if you can get to 3 points and they'll allow you to proceed. If you get 4 to 5 points, they'll refer you to secondary screening. Secondary screening means that they're going to search you personally and talk to you. And then if you get 6 or more, they're going to refer you to selective screening. They're also going to notify LEO. LEO stands for law enforcement officers. So this is like the police. So the TSA are like the police for the airport, but they're going to notify the police. The police are also present in airports. So like the RCMP, for example, will have officers that are in the airport. Now, if you are traveling with a family, then you get 2 points taken off. If it looks like you're traveling with someone that's married and both spouses are over 55 years old then you deduct 2 points. And generally, if you're a female over 55 or a male over 65, then you're also deemed lower risk, and so they'll take a point off for those reasons. Then it goes on. So you can pick up points for things that you might be carrying. So like if you have a bunch of batteries and electronics, if you have a GPS unit, maps, that kind of stuff. And then there's some other things that will that are bad enough that they'll trigger automatic law enforcement actions. So like excessive throat clearing, your face becomes flushed, your eyes are blinking fast, anyways, you can read through it itself. Okay, so this was the program they came up with. Do you think it helped? Do you think they caught terrorists with this? If you had to guess, maybe not. All right. So first off, it was heavily criticized. So people with expertise in psychology said that this is all junk science. So like somebody who's trying to deceive you, they're trained not to deceive you. They're going to be able to suppress these. And there's going to be normal people for all sorts of reasons. You're traveling, you're stressed, you're worried about losing your flight, and you're going to exhibit a lot of these signs, even though you have nothing to do with terrorism. So humans do barely better than 50% in trying to guess whether someone's being deceptive. And that applies whether you're trained or not. So I have no training in this. You could have went through this SPOT program and spent 2 weeks training in it. Our ability to identify deceptive behavior is basically a coin toss, both of us, even though you did all the training. Sometimes there's a myth. There's even like a TV show about this. Forget what it's called, where there's a guy who like reads micro expressions. Tim Roth is the lead character, and it actually started in an airport. Like the opening scene of the very first episode was they found someone who was a TSA agent that was really good at this, and then they recruited them to do this. But basically, there aren't people who are like really good at reading other people. Okay, so it's not something that you can just sort of like you're genetically disposed to it. Cops and custom agents are no better than anyone else. If you're deceiving, there's basically no really reliable cues where you say that is absolutely 100% deception as opposed to something else. And there's a lot of reasons why you might exhibit the signs even though you're not lying about who you are. Then we can look and see, like, did it work or not? So first off, it costs $900 million, which is quite a lot of money to do all this training. We don't know, like it was secretive. We didn't even know the program existed until the media found it and then they leaked it. But when they leaked it, there was one set of data where they did an analysis over 5 weeks. So over a 5-week period, 4% of people were sent to secondary screening. Of the 4% of people that went to secondary screening, 0.04 of the 4% were referred to law enforcement. So police got involved in these cases. Of them, 16 were arrested, so 0.01% were actually arrested. And if you count up what they were arrested for, 14 were immigration reasons, not traveling with the right documents. 1 was because they were drunk. 1 was either, I don't know if they had drugs or they were inhibited with drugs, and 0 terrorists. Okay, so it didn't catch anyone. It was kind of useless. People said it's probably about illegal immigration anyways. Like the government they say it's about terrorism, but really they just care about immigration. People said it was racist. If you go through the criteria, you see stuff that would target people like Middle Easterns in particular. And so anyways, it was heavily criticized. It went through the press. We don't know what happened to the program. Maybe it still runs, maybe it doesn't. Again, a lot of this stuff is secretive, but we at least got a snapshot of what was happening at that time. Okay, so we make it past the first initial pre-screen. Now we're ready to go through what we call security. Okay. All right, so the actual security screening itself. Okay, so who's doing it? So the people doing it is, again, TSA. So it's CT-TSA in Canada. CA-TSA, I've been saying it wrong all along. CA-TSA. And they do scan your boarding pass, but they don't check your passport. Okay? So I want to pause here and note that no one's checked your passport yet. Okay? And when you go through security, like you've gone all the way through security, no one's looked at your face and looked at your passport, unless if you happen to check in on like in person at a counter. Nobody even knows that the ticket that you have is, that name matches your name, that matches your face. Okay, just saying. But anyways, okay, what's the point of this security stuff? What we want to do is we want to search basically what are you carrying with you onto a plane. Okay, what can you not? Does anyone know anything that you can't carry on a plane? Okay. Actually, I'll come back to that in a sec. How am I going to search what you're allowed to take on or onto a plane or not? Okay. So what technology will I use to search? Okay. What else? Okay. What else? Okay, physical. Okay, so there's like 6 of them, I think, if I remember correctly. Okay, so we'll go through them one by one. So metal detector's the original one. What does it detect? It's in the name, but it detects metal. Okay, so you walk through it, it detects metal. You take your stuff, like your bags and stuff, you run it through something else. What's that technology? Is that a metal detector? It's X-ray. Okay, so what's an X-ray do? It doesn't just detect metal, but it can look through it. Okay, why don't humans go through an X-ray? If your bag goes through an X-ray, why don't you put the human through an X-ray? It's dangerous, it's radiation, it causes cancer. So we do a metal detector for the humans. We do, for the bags and stuff like that, we'll do an X-ray. But now there's a new technology, which is a very, very shallow X-ray. So it is an X-ray technology, but it doesn't penetrate very far. It basically just penetrates your clothes, not into your skin, and that's deemed safe. Okay, what's the difference between that and a metal detector? They kind of look the same. You walk through something, but this is the one where you stand and you put your hands up and the thing like kind of whirls around and it takes a picture of you. Okay, what do they see? They see an image of your naked body and they see anything else that's on top of it. Now, a lot of people said, we don't want people to see our naked body. Okay, and so then the airport said, okay, here's the policy. The person who's looking at the screen of the picture, they can't physically be in the same room as you yourself. So they're just looking at a computer screen, they see your naked body, but they don't see you, and they have no vision of you. So I can't look at a person and then look at their picture. So that's how they tried to solve that privacy issue itself. Okay, so we have X-rays, we have metal detectors, we have the CT scans. I forget what they are called. What else? Physical. So you can opt out of it too. You could be like, I don't like that. I don't want someone looking at my naked body. I'm scared of getting cancer. I don't want to go through that. I opt out. They say that's fine. Step over here, and then they'll do a physical pat down. So that's the alternative. So you are free to do that. It's legal for you to do that if you want to. I've done it before just to see what happens. But anyways. Okay, anything else? There's at least two other things that may or may not be used. Okay, so dogs is another one. So this was sort of a weird experience where I went to an airport and everyone was standing in line and they said, okay, everyone come over here, stand in a circle and put your bag in front at your feet. So we stood in a circle. No one knew what really was going on. And then they brought a dog. The dog kind of runs around the circle a couple times and then it goes off. And then they say, okay, now you don't have to go through the metal detectors. You've already been screened or whatever. So what's the dog trained to do?
Sniff the drugs.
Okay, so it's sniffing, so it has very strong scent. So that's what it's doing. Now, this is a misconception, okay? There are two things that we care about going through airports. Drugs would be one. What's another thing that we care about? Firearms, explosives, bombs, that kind of thing. CATSA, they don't care about drugs at all. Okay? If they see it, they're going to report it, but that's not their job. Okay? Later we'll meet border services, that's their job. Okay? CATSA only care about bombs and explosives and things like that. So those are not drug dogs, they're explosive dogs, but there could be drug dogs that are involved as well, but that would be border services that would run that itself. Okay? And then the final thing along that same line is sometimes you get pulled aside and they have these little swabs. It's like a little circle with a stick, and then they make you put your hands out, and then they run it across your clothes and around your hands and things like that. And again, what they're doing is they're trying to pick up any traces of explosive material that's on your skin. Then they have a machine, so they stick it in a machine. The machine does the analysis. It's pretty quick, it makes a decision about a second, and then they let you go through, assuming that it passes itself. Okay, so this is an X-ray. This is this is a metal detector. This is the X-ray that's shallow. This is a physical pat down. There's inspection as well. So that's another one where if they see something in your bag, they're going to open it up and then they're going to go through it and look at it. There's dogs and there's this wand thing that tests for chemicals itself. Okay. Now, what are you not allowed to carry on? So this is a list that CTSA are looking for, or CATSA. So this comes from, their parent is Transport Canada in Canada, and so this is the official list themselves. So you can see guns, firearms, devices that can stun, sharp objects. So they're basically just weapons by different names, tools that could injure the aircraft, blunt objects, anything that's explosive, dangerous goods, acids, compressed gases, inorganic material. And then you have the classic, which is liquids, aerosols, or gels that are over 100 milliliters if it's by volume. And you can only carry so much that it could all fit into a 1 liter bag. Okay, so that's the main restriction that we're all familiar with. Notice there's no drugs on here. There's no, counterfeit money. There's a lot of unlawful things, but they don't care about that. Okay, other people will care about that. Law enforcement cares about it, but it's not the job of CATSA. So this is what they're looking for themselves. Okay. Let's go to this one. So you know that you can't take liquids over 100 milliliters, right? Why is that? If you had to guess. Why can't you take a bottle of water on the plane? Okay, so it could be something that, like some leakage of liquid or something like that. So that isn't the reason, but it's a good guess. Okay, so explosive materials, bombs can be made out of liquids. Okay, and so that's the reason why there's a restriction. Is it's pretty easy to disguise because you can't really like if something's in a bottle, you can't really figure out what it is, right? There's no machine that will like tell you exactly what's in that, unless if you're like testing it, but that's too slow. You can't just like run it through a machine and it says that's water or that's not water. Okay, so what we are worried about is that it's explosive material. But we can't test for it, so what we do is we just limit the size. Okay, so we say you can't take more than 100 milliliters. Does that mean you can never take a bottle of something more than 100 milliliters? Is there any exemptions to this rule? Sorry, Okay, so there's a whole thing where you buy it there. That's another thing we'll talk about. That's usually you buy it after security anyways. And it's sealed up, and it's more for like customs reason, like if you buy a bottle of alcohol or something like that. But, yeah. Okay, so I've traveled with kids before, and so I can tell you one thing that you're allowed to take that's liquid in any quantity you want is breast milk, formula, anything for a baby. So there's an exemption for that. And so we've gone through with like a lot of like formula before. And it doesn't matter, it can be over 100 milliliters. It cannot all fit into a 1 liter bag. Why is sort of obvious because you have to feed babies and they're not, you can't buy it like in an airport lobby or restroom. So they're sort of stuck that way. But what does that mean for the security policy? If I want to blow up a plane, I want to use a liquid bomb, what am I going to make it look like? I'm going to make it look like breast milk. I'm going to put it in a Medela bag. And then I can carry it through, okay? So a lot of security, there's a lot of criticism of security policy saying it's security theater. It's meant to make you feel secure and safe traveling and you're not worried about it, but in the end, it doesn't really do anything. It's not like meaningful itself. Another exemption is for contact lens cleaner. I don't know why, or saline solution. I think it's because usually you get a big bottle and they just didn't make small bottles. And so they carved out an exemption for that. And so you can travel with like really big bottles. There's a story that's on Moodle. It's an article. This is Bruce Schneier. He's like a security expert. And then he's also like a big critic of security, airport security itself. And so in this article, he goes with a reporter and he takes them through the airport and shows them like kind of like all the flaws in security. And so one thing he does is he had 2 bottles. They were 24 ounces total, so that's like a lot of liquid. And they weren't even like official contact lens fluid. It was just like a bottle, and with masking tape, he wrote like saline solution on them. And they did pull him aside at first. So they pulled it aside and said, what is this? Like, why are you traveling with it? And he said, oh, it's contact lens fluid. I'm allowed to travel with it. And they said, oh, yeah, you're right. There is an exemption for that. No problem. But why do you have 2 bottles? Like, why not 1 bottle? He said, because I have 2 eyes. And so that was a joke. But anyways, they let him go through with it. Now, in the same article, you'll see, going back to like the stuff that's printed on a boarding pass, and there's no digital security on it, What he did is he made fake boarding passes. So they were able to go through the TSA line even though they didn't have TSA status. And they changed their boarding group so they were able to go on the plane right away, even though they wouldn't. And then there's a whole bunch of other stuff in the article that's good. Okay. There's the X-ray itself. So the X-ray will look at your laptop, or sorry, at your bag and see what's in your bag. Traditionally, you have to take your laptop out of your bag. Why is that? Okay, so there's a couple of reasons for it. A, it kind of blocks the X-ray, so you can't really see what's behind it. Secondly, the circuitry in it looks like it could be an explosive as well. And you might try to hide an explosive in a laptop itself. And so additionally, another reason that it's off on the side is they may ask you to turn it on. So that's their check of like, is this a real laptop or not? Now laptops are so thin that it doesn't, I don't think that's like a big concern anymore. But previously you had like really thick laptops. There's a lot of space, empty space in a laptop. Now, even if you disguise an explosive in a laptop, you could probably make the screen turn on anyways. Like that test doesn't really work that well because you could have like a very, very small like Arduino chip or something like that that runs Linux that makes it look like a functioning computer even though it's not a functioning computer. Another thing is shoes. So now you don't have to take your shoes off anymore. It might be on an airport by airport basis, but in Canada you do not have to do it. In the US, recently when I've flown, I've not had to take them off. But for a long time, we always had to take our shoes off. Why did we have to take our shoes off? So there was one person once that tried to put a bomb in a shoe, got on the airplane, was sitting there trying to light their shoe, and it wasn't working, and the people that were sitting beside him like pinned him down and said, this guy's like trying to light his shoe on fire. So they took his shoes away and then they studied it and it turned out there was a bomb in it. And so that was all over the news. Next week, TSA is like, everyone take their shoes off, right? And then, and so Bruce Schneier says, we defend against what the terrorists did last week. So whatever they did, whatever was all over the news, people are concerned and they're worried about it, then there's a policy to prevent it. But is it really like protecting bombs from getting on planes? Well, now no one's going to put a bomb in a shoe. So a shoe's like probably like the last thing that you have to check now because like people know that it doesn't work. Okay, so we make it through security. Where do we go next? So there's two final steps that we haven't gone through yet. Okay, so we go to the gate, we check in, we get on the airplane. Do we talk to someone there? Usually, yeah. Okay, so there's going to be a bit of security around that. And then what's the other thing that happens? Maybe after you land and now you've landed in the other, maybe you're going to a different country. Do you just walk out of the airport? Okay, so normally you go through border services themselves, okay? In Canada, if you go to the US, you'll do border services first before you even get on the plane. If you go to any other country, you'll do it when you land. Okay, so we'll do border services first, and then we'll talk about what happens when you board the plane itself. So we call this customs or border services. Okay, I don't have it. I should have it. It's probably the most important thing. Okay, you go to border services. Maybe you type in a computer. Maybe you talk to someone, probably a bit of both. When you're talking to someone, who are you talking to? So let's say you're flying into Canada. You're talking to someone. There's some sort of police, right? Are they police? Are they TSA? Are they their own thing? And so the answer is they're their own thing. Okay, so they're different. So they're not police. They're not TSA. They're border services, Canada Border Services. Again, they're a form of law enforcement. They look like police officers. They have uniforms and guns and things like that. But they're a separate thing. They don't really care about terrorism so much. That's CTSA. At least terrorism that could bring down the airplane, that's the CTSA's job. Okay, so that's not their concern. Their concern is just like who's coming into the country and why. And when are they going to leave, kind of thing. Okay, there's a good program called, the name just escaped my mind. it's a Canadian program anyway. It's like a reality show, and they follow around border services. So every episode, there's like 3 or 4 cases that happen, and they're like real life cases. And you, sorry?
Discovery Channel.
Yeah. Do you know the name of it? I think it's like, maybe it's just called Border Services.
Something like that.
Yeah.
It's totally based on the airport scenario.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's a fun show if you want to see. I learned a lot like just from watching it because there's a lot of weird stuff that I didn't know that they really considered. But Canada Frontline. Okay. Nice. Yeah. Okay. So so what are they looking for? So this is where they care more about drugs and things like that. Cash. So if you have to declare anything over $10,000 that you're bringing across the border, they care about your immigration status. They care about whether you have a visa, if you need a visa, if you're coming to work, things like that. When you're in that space, in that like room with them, you basically have no rights as a citizen. So if you get arrested by the police and you're sitting in a police office, or questioning room or something, you have a lot more rights than you do standing in front of a border service, okay? Because you're kind of like not in the country yet. And so they can do basically whatever they want. They can ask you whatever you want. They can search you. What will happen on the TV show is someone will show up and they'll be like, I'm just coming to Canada, I'm visiting someone. And they're like, okay, that's fine, give me your phone. So you give them the phone and they'll be like, what's the passcode? And you have to, like legally, you're obliged to give your passcode. So you give your passcode and then they go through your phone, they start going through your text messages, they start calling people. They're like, hey, this person, like I see they've been texting you. They say they're coming to Canada and they're going to be staying with you for a week. Like, do you know them? Like, what are they? Like, and they'll be like, oh yeah, I hired them to like do a job or whatever. And then they'll come back to you and say, well, this person's saying that you're coming here to work, you're not coming here to visit, or whatever the case is. And so basically you have like no rights, and like they'll do a thorough search. They'll start calling people on your phone and everything like that. So it's a very like intense inspection if it gets to that level. Other times they care a lot about like things like food. So they're worried a lot about, let's say you're in a country and there's certain like insects in that country that haven't been introduced in Canada, or bacteria or viruses and things like that. So you're not allowed to bring like almost any food into Canada. So there's a lot of cases where people like bring, I don't know, a fruit from like wherever they're from, it's in their bag. And so they have to go through this big screening process and they open up the bags and then they throw the fruit out and things like that. So anyways, this is the whole customs thing. And then you're ready to board the flight itself. So when you board the flight, what you'll do is you'll give the boarding pass and your passport. This is the first time they actually do an ID check. Okay, so they're going to look at your passport, they're going to look at the picture on it, they're going to look at your face, and they're going to try and figure out whether you're actually the person that is boarding it. And then they'll either let you go on the plane or not. This is a check where they have a back-end database. So they know everyone that's on the flight. So even if you printed the fake information on your boarding pass, it won't match their database. A lot of other places, actually all the other places where TSA is scanning your boarding pass, they don't know anything about Air Canada and the flight and all that stuff. At least we don't think they do. They could in theory, but it would involve a lot of database sharing and things like that. As far as we know, they just know what's basically printed on your barcode or on your boarding pass, and that's what they know. But in this case, it is tied to the flight itinerary, so they know it. It's Air Canada. It's not a police officer or something like that. It's a staff of the airline that's doing this particular check, and then they'll either let you on the flight or not. Now, what you show as ID depends if you're traveling within Canada or international. So if you're traveling international, you need a passport, maybe a Nexus card or something like that if you're going to the US, but you need like a high level of identification. If I'm flying from Montreal to Toronto, I'm not leaving Canada. I'm not going to go through border services. So this whole thing doesn't happen, okay? And I just have to show a driver's license or something like that. I have to have some photo ID, but I don't have to necessarily have my passport. Some countries, including the US for a long time, if it was a domestic flight, they wouldn't check at all. Okay, so they wouldn't do an ID check. It's just like basically if you have a ticket, then that's fine. Okay, and this turned out to be a problem. So one thing we study in policies are like kind of loopholes. And so this was the problem if you don't check the boarding pass. When I check in to the flight, maybe I do it from my phone, okay? The phone knows whether I'm on the no-fly list or not, and it's going to issue me a boarding pass, but my phone isn't checking my passport. It's not checking my face to know whether I'm the right person or not. When I go through screening, usually they just check the boarding pass. Sometimes in the US, they do an ID check. So like before you get to the security line, there is an officer, it's a TSA officer, and they look at your boarding pass, they look at your passport, they look at your face, they make sure that your face matches the passport, and the name on the passport matches the ticket, okay? But they don't have any like back-end database. They don't know whether you're actually on the flight or anything like that. And then when you board the flight, normally we would check all three things. But what could happen is if you're flying domestically in the US, they wouldn't do the ID check. And the reason they don't do the ID check is because in the US, TSA was checking your ID anyway. Okay? So all three things got checked at some point, but the problem was they were being checked by different people, and those people weren't necessarily talking to each other. Okay? So TSA were checking your ID against the boarding pass. The airline was checking your boarding pass against the no-fly list. Okay? But nobody was doing all three. All right? Is there a loophole there? Is there something that we could do to exploit that? Could we get onto an airplane even though we were on the no-fly list if these were the two checks that were happening and the people doing the checks didn't talk to each other? And additionally, remember, I told you that boarding passes don't have digital signatures. You can write anything you want on them. Okay? So it took people a long time, like a lot of thinking, a security researcher who thought through this whole process, but he realized that, oh, actually, what you could do is if you had two boarding passes, you could actually get onto a plane. So this is how it would work, is you would have a boarding pass for someone who's not on the no-fly list, okay? So that's the boarding pass, and this is the real boarding pass. The only problem is that you're not that person. Okay, you're not the person on boarding pass 1. Okay, you're a different person. And what you would do is you would have a fake boarding pass that would have your real name on it, even though you're not on the flight. And then you have your real passport, because it's hard to like fake passports. Okay? And so what would happen is if you go to, when you check in and you board the flight, you would show the real boarding pass, which had the real name, but because they weren't checking your ID, they weren't checking whether you're that person or not. And then when you went to TSA, you would show the fake boarding pass with your real name and your real passport. They're checking that they match each other, but what they don't realize is that this person isn't even on the airline, right? They're not even on the plane, because that's only Air Canada knows that. And what they don't realize is that they're on the no-fly list, and they shouldn't be flying in the first place, because Air Canada is checking that, not at this stage in the security process itself, okay? So policies, they're really complicated, and it's easy to make mistakes like this, that like you look at this picture and you think, oh, that looks pretty complete, like somebody's checking everything, right? But you have to think like an attacker and think about what happens. So this person, he wrote an article about it. He even made a website where you could fake a boarding pass just to prove that it was real. Then he got his door kicked down by the FBI, and they took all his computers and things like that, and then there was a big like legal fight over it, and eventually he was exonerated of everything. But and then they also changed the law, so then they started checking IDs at the last stage to close that loophole as a direct result of this identification of a flaw. Okay, so what are the lessons we can learn from all this airport stuff and all this policy stuff? So one of the problems that we saw is that if different people are checking different things and they're not talking to each other, then policies get really hard, okay? So airports have a policy, CATSA has a policy, Border Services has a policy. You have to make sure there's compatibility amongst multiple policies and that every use case is getting caught through it. Another thing, this is a quote from the paper, it says, technological sophistication and research novelty are negatively correlated with security impacts on users, meaning that like people don't really study these issues at all. So like the issues that matter the most are usually policy issues. They're the things that affect the most users, and they affect your security in like real tangible ways. And yet, because it's not like cool research, or it's not like involving like elliptic curve cryptography or static analysis and AI and things like that, neural nets, then researchers like tend to ignore it. Okay, how can we solve this problem? So the first thing we could do is we could try to audit it. So you could bring someone in and say, I want you to go through the policies. I want you to try and figure out every way that you can break it. There is a kind of profession that does this. They also employ this in combination with social engineering, which we'll talk about at the end of the course. And you can hire them. It's like a pen tester, but they're like a organizational penetration, not like technical, like network level penetration. And so they'll come in and they'll try to understand the policies, and they'll try and find loopholes, and they'll exploit it. And they may pretend to be people that they aren't and things like that. Then they'll write a report and tell you what they found. Now this is expensive, so you're going to spend a lot of time like understanding how the system works and things like that. And if you do this job, by the way, you should get ethics clearance. So even the people that wrote this paper, they had to get ethics clearance to even do this research, where they called people up and asked to have a SIM swap. Another thing we could do is we have like software bounties. So like if you find a flaw in software, you can report it, disclose it to the company, and the company will pay you. And so we could do the same thing with policies. That doesn't really exist. So if you find a policy flaw, then you could report it, to the government or to the company or whatever, and then you could make money. And if you can make money, then that incentivizes you to look. So now people are looking for it because they want to make that money, and so it tests it harder. You can try and do regulation. So in the US, to stop SIM swapping is like not as prevalent as it used to be. And that's largely because the government stepped in and they started regulating and making sure that the requirements for a telecom to answer a phone call of someone who's like, I lost my phone, I need a new SIM. They make sure that it's the same across the board. You could just have people that blow the whistle and say there's a flaw here. So that's sort of like what happened with the guy who reported the flaw in the boarding pass. Later in social engineering, you'll see a story where someone wrote a cover story for Wired magazine because he was a journalist, and it outlined another policy flaw that, combined with the social engineering attack, got his credentials stolen. Another thing people have thought is we're pretty good at if you give me a piece of software, I can do a pretty good job of finding if there's any vulnerabilities in that software. Why is that? It's because I have algorithms that I can run on it. I can search, for things. I know things that I'm looking for. A policy is like harder because it's not written down. If it's written down, it's not like a computer could understand it. It's just like English text or something like that. And so what if we took the policy and we wrote it up almost like it was software, or like mathematical statements or logical statements? So we translated the policy into a series of logical statements. Then what we could do is we could run the algorithms on it and try and see if there's flaws. So there's a whole branch of research called formal methods or formal verification, which is exactly that. You take something, you translate it, and then you use algorithms to try and find if there's like certain conditions. Like you'll say something like, here's all the checks that happen. It's all coded up. It should not be the case that someone with a no-fly, who's on the no-fly list, should be able to board a plane, right? And then it will check every, like what if the person does this or this, and this check does this, and it will check every combination. And if it ever finds a case where they get on the plane, then it reports it. So that's sort of effectively how it works. Now, this isn't perfect. So the first thing is when you model it, when you write, like you turn the policy into code, if you make a mistake, you miss something, then it doesn't matter. You run the analysis on the code, but if the code isn't matched the real policy, then there could be a flaw in the real policy that's not get reflected in the code, and then the algorithms aren't going to find it. There's also the case of like policies can be written down and they can be secure as written, but when you get someone on the phone, like say you call up customer services, they have a bunch of rules, they're supposed to follow the rules, but they'll bend the rules. Okay, so they might do something, they might skip it, they might, if they believe your story, they might try and help you out. So you could spend a lot of time analyzing the policy and find that the policy is sound, but then when people try to implement it, that's where the problem is. Another thing with this is that, if you make any change to the policy, you have to redo the whole analysis. If organization A does it with their policy, organization B wants to do it, the fact that organization A did it doesn't really help organization B. It doesn't save any time because you have to do like a job from scratch for it. So you can't really reuse it across organizations or across different versions itself. Okay, so this is like modeling policies and like trying to find loopholes and make sure that policies are sound is still like a tough area to work on, but it's like immensely important. And a lot of attacks are, a component of the attack would come down to like a flaw in the policy. It's not always just technical attacks that people do. Okay, any questions about any of this stuff? Okay, good. So I'll see you all next week.